I'm Dr. Natasha Gettings, and welcome to Free Your Mind Friday. For those of you joining Free Your Mind Friday for the first time, I am a double board certified child and adolescent and adult psychiatrist practicing in the Chicagoland area, and I've created these videos for us to take part in a journey that will allow everyone to develop a stronger knowledge base regarding taking care of the body and the brain. As a mental health professional working in the community, I am extremely passionate about educating everyone on ways that they can utilize day in and day out to help maintain healthy brain function. So as we kicked off 2017, I spent some time explaining to everyone the differences between different mental health professionals. We talked a little bit about specialties. So if you haven't seen those videos, please make sure that you visit my website, clarionConscience.com, or my YouTube channel, Natasha Gettings MD, where you can find those videos and learn a little bit more about the mental health profession. So last week we covered more in detail some of the ways that we can help to maintain healthy brain function. And I emphasized the importance of nutrition, which is something that unfortunately is oftentimes missed. That conversation was kind of sparked by a video that I did where I covered dementia. And dementia is a disease state in the brain where our neurons begin to degenerate. And I explained that Alzheimer's is the most commonly occurring form of dementia here in the United States, and its incidence is actually on the incline. And so one of the ways that we can all be proactive and exercise prevention of this disease is to make sure that we maintain a healthy diet with good fats and stay away from trans fats and hydrogenated oils. So if you missed that video, make sure you check it out on YouTube. Lots of healthy information there. Today I want to shift gears and move on to discussing another disease state that really hits close to home for myself and I'm sure for many of you, and that disease or diagnosis is called post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, for those of you who maybe are not familiar with this diagnosis, I want to remind you again that our brain is an organ that is constantly processing sensory information all around us. So I want you to think about what happens to the brain when the brain is on sensory overload because of a traumatic environment. There are different areas of our brain that process information and also elicit certain responses. So today we're going to talk about three very crucial areas of the brain. But before I get to that, I just want to say that trauma is something that anybody can experience, and whether it's sexual assault, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's being in war, trauma can have long-lasting emotional effects on the human brain and a person's overall well-being. And at times it concerns me because we live in this culture where there's still so much stigma surrounding receiving mental health treatment, and so a lot of individuals who are survivors of trauma are not able to obtain the mental health care services that are necessary in order to get stability back in their life and to begin the process of healing. There are lots of children that are in our foster care system because they are survivors of trauma, and unfortunately the therapeutic services that are vital to them becoming healthy, well-rounded individuals is not always available for them. The same applies to our veterans who every day go above and beyond to protect our country and then return home with a lot of the traumatic influences that war can have on their overall functioning. They too need services. There should be no stigmatizing beliefs that interfere with a person obtaining the care that they need. And if you know someone, or if you yourself are currently right now today living in an environment that is traumatic, please know that there are people here to help you. I'm available for consultations. I'm available to help anyone create a plan that they need to implement in order to remove themselves from that environment. I myself grew up in a home with significant amounts of domestic violence, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and I can understand firsthand the long-lasting impacts that that has on all of us. I come from generations of emotional and physical and sexual abuse, and a very large family of individuals who have all triumphed and survived through many tests. And I know that my family is no different than your family. I know that we all have these stories that lie within, and we need the opportunity, we deserve the opportunity to be able to heal and to release and to tell our truth and to be more aware and conscious of how these events can impact us in the long run. And I'm really passionate about breaking generational cycles of abuse. One of the most traumatizing things that a person can endure is being abused over time, especially emotional abuse. And what we don't realize is that sometimes when we've removed ourselves from these abusive environments, we still become our own worst enemy. We can become our own abuser. We can start to engage in self-torture and self-defeating thoughts that plague us throughout the day and take away our focus on being well and healthy and a productive member of society. I want to talk about war for a little bit. Obviously, throughout history, I don't know that there's been a time where we as human species have been void of war somewhere on this planet. And as it stands right now today, there are so many men and women who have served this country and are struggling, in fact, to find peace of mind, to find joy, to find stability after they have done their duty. So I want to talk a little bit today about what actually happens to the brain when an individual experiences trauma. And the first thing that everyone has to understand is that our brain is a bundle of circuits. I explained last week that it's the powerhouse and that our neurons have lots of jobs and they communicate with each other constantly throughout the day. And one of the jobs that our brain has is to help us to recognize danger. And so we have what's called a stress circuit in the brain. And that circuit is basically comprised of three major structures in the brain. So we have the amygdala, we have the hippocampus, and we also have the ventral media frontotemporal region. These three areas of the brain are core circuitry areas when it comes to understanding how trauma can affect us emotionally in the long run. So our hippocampus is the part of the brain that does a lot of memory storing. And I'm sure you all are aware that some of the symptoms that we see in PTSD include flashbacks and nightmares. What literally happens is that these traumatic events become so deeply stored into the hippocampus, even when they are no longer occurring, it's very difficult for us to get them out of our memory bank and to no longer focus on them. I find this to be probably the most distressing element of PTSD, where patients are really struggling just not to relive or think about some of these traumatic events. And I want to remind everyone out there today who is going through this and who's frustrated and who's maybe even blaming yourself to remember that your brain has a lot of functions that are beyond your control. It doesn't mean that you can't get help and you can't work towards improving these symptoms, but we've got to stop beating ourselves up when we've lived through something that has caused changes in our brain that we have no control over. So the hippocampus is there to store information regardless what the information is. However, when the information is traumatic, when the experience is traumatic, it can definitely have a huge toll on this area of the brain. The next area of the brain that I really want everyone to do some reading about, take some time to inform yourself, is the amygdala. Our amygdala's job is to recognize danger. And when you trigger the amygdala repeatedly through repeated trauma, whether it be childhood trauma, whether it be trauma from war, the amygdala becomes on fire. It becomes hypervigilant, which is another symptom of PTSD, where we see an individual who is not in a dangerous situation. However, their brain has literally become programmed to be on the lookout and be alert all the time. I grew up in a home with my father, who is a Vietnam War veteran, and was able to witness firsthand, even as a child, the effects that war can have when it comes to hypervigilance. I wasn't aware of it at the time. I didn't know what to call it, but now I do. And I want to help other people to understand that we shouldn't use derogatory labeling for individuals that have gone through trauma. We shouldn't use words like crazy or lunatic. We should take the time to understand the changes that have occurred in their brain. Our brain is what we call neuroplastic, meaning that it is changing as we are engaging and interacting and interfacing different things in our lives. And it's not as simple as pressing a delete button or reboot when it comes to the brain. We have to be aware of the tools that are available in order to help those members of society who are survivors of trauma. We have to make sure that we don't belittle them, make sure that we don't minimize their symptoms just because they may not be visible to us, because they very much so are there and very much so are real. I want everyone today to make the commitment to remove yourself from anything that is traumatizing and understand the damage that it can cause to the brain. Neuroscience and research has shown us that repeat exposure to trauma causes damage to these brain structures, specifically the hippocampus and the amygdala. I want everyone to take the pledge to protect your brain from the negative effects of trauma. If you're exposing yourself or you're in a situation that you know is unhealthy, that you know you need to be out of, I want to help you create the strength to move past that. If you are a survivor of trauma and you're no longer in the traumatic environment, but you know that you are being impacted by symptoms that are out of your control, reach out to a mental health professional, reach out to a counselor, reach out to a pastor, reach out to whoever you're comfortable with at this time starting this journey with. There are life coaches, licensed clinical professional counselors, and there's also myself, board certified psychiatrist, that are here to help you maintain wellness and begin a journey of healing. Trauma is nothing to be minimized, and we all have to understand and appreciate that today and get the tools together that we need to move past it and live our healthiest life. I am Dr. Natasha Gettings. I'm going to be here every week to talk about different disease states in the brain, to help spark your interest, your knowledge. I want this to be that spark plug that gets you to go and do your own research and read a little bit more about what diseases can interfere with healthy brain functioning. I'm going to be here every week. I want your feedback. I want you to go visit my Instagram page. Please leave comments, Natasha T. Gettings, MD. Leave comments on Twitter so that I know what topics you want to hear about. PTSD is real. PTSD needs to be acknowledged, and we need to make sure as a nation that we have the services available for those individuals that are healing from trauma. Please make sure to tune in next week as we continue to discuss different disease states of the brain. May is National Trauma Awareness Month. I'm going to be giving more information that I think you'll find useful as we continue to learn how to take care of ourselves. Thank you and be well.